All right, so I thought I would give a quick explanation of the video that I made where Cringeosaurus is a red-hooded dwarf who slices open Donald Sutherland's carotid artery. I thought I would give some backstory to that. Because if you saw that video, you probably don't know what movie it's from. And, when I made the video, I thought, well, I don't want to spoil, because it is a that scene is a spoiler of a movie called Don't Look Now. And, originally I thought, well, if somebody hasn't seen that movie, that's just going to spoil the ending for them. But then I thought again and realized, most people probably either already watched the movie or they had heard about it. And if they haven't heard about it, they're probably never going to watch the movie anyway, because the movie's very plodding and slow. It's made in 1973. And in 1973, audiences had a different set of expectations as far as movies go. They expected some character development. They were much more patient. They weren't interested in going to movies for, a spectacle so much as they were for a story. They were interested in stories. They wanted to be told a story with real people, real emotions, real psychology. And part of that was a function of Watergate and just maybe the 70s and the Vietnam War. It came at the end of the, 1973 was, right after the 60s counterculture. So, sort of the ethos at the time was different. And so there was a breakdown of morality. People had questioned morality in general, and they questioned the purpose of life that they were taught as children growing up in the 50s and the early 60s. So those things came under question, and they were questioning authority because of, as I mentioned, the Watergate scandal, as well as the Vietnam War and things like that. And institutions were being questioned, and morality was being questioned. And you could think of morality as essentially a mechanism or a device that justifies war. Basically morality breaks people into good and bad. Morality tells you that some people are good and some people are bad, and that's used as a justification for war. And it's a way of synchronizing hatred and cooperation. So those two things are the reason why morality exists. That's the function of morality, is to justify war. And that was breaking down. And so the archetypes, the familiar archetypes associated with, that you find in literature and plays and early movies from the 30s and early movies in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the good guys versus bad guys. There was the good cowboys and the bad cowboys, and the good cowboys always wore white hats. The bad cowboys wore black hats. That was a reflection of the ethos at but prior to the 60s, where you have good versus bad, and mythologies usually have this dichotomy. You have good versus bad, good and evil. And that was breaking down. So you had more psychological thrillers with morally ambiguous characters, and you did not have the strong hero archetypes, but rather you had people like Dirty Harry, or even like Harry Call is another example. People who are sort of morally ambiguous, who are vulnerable, specifically men who are vulnerable. You don't have the the feminism that you see now in movies. So you still had men who acted like men, but they were just more realistic, right? You didn't have, I mean, audiences at the time, they weren't ready for the beta cuck archetype yet. But they were interested in movies that had vulnerable people. So, also they were more patient. They were more interested in psychology, and it didn't reach the point where, I mean, film had not yet reached the point where it was just like the cinematic equivalent of, Lucky Charms. Like if movies from the 70s were oatmeal, movies today are like Lucky Charms, or not even Lucky Charms. Like if somebody took some gummy bears and poured milk over them and called it cereal, that's the absolute state of film today. Like, in the form, film doesn't even exist, as I understand it. Something else exists in its place. It's candy. It's garbage. It's just all AI. It's all crap at this point, sadly. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So the movie's slow, and it's not for modern audiences, basically. Okay, and in the film, Donald Sutherland plays an architect who is, and by the way, this was before Star Wars and Jaws, right? Part of the reason Star Wars was so successful is that it tapped into that forgotten archetypal story of heroes and villains that people, probably psychologically could relate to at a very base level, but that they had abandoned due to, circumstances in culture and society. And it was also very fast-paced and action-packed, and people like that shit. So, but anyway, back to Don't Look Now. But Don't Look Now was a film where Donald Sutherland plays an architect whose daughter died 5 years ago in a drowning incident. And presumably she was murdered, and they never caught the murderer. They never even saw the murderer. But Donald Sutherland is also has psychic abilities. He has flashes of psychic ability, and so does his wife. I mean, I might be misremembering the details because it's been so long since I saw the movie. But I think, as I remember, both of the main characters had some kind of psychic ability. And in the film, Donald Sutherland is on a work assignment in Venice, Italy, to do restoration work on old cathedrals, because old cathedrals at the time were falling apart, which also is symbolic too, if you look at the time period. The old institutions are falling apart. They're falling by the wayside, and they're more like museums than social institutions that serve the functions in society that they once did. So that has some symbolism as well. But he's an architect on assignment. He's doing restoration work in cathedrals. And his wife is having problems functioning because she's having, I think, visions or psychological problems associated with both the death of their daughter from 5 years ago, as well as her psychic abilities. She's having weird visions, and these are causing consternation for her. So they go to a psychic in Venice, and the psychic informs the couple that, I think at some point she informs the couple that he's going to die in Venice. And also I should add that throughout the film, there is a spate of suspicious murders taking place. There are prostitutes whose bodies are being dumped in the river, and the authorities don't know who is the perpetrator. They don't know who the perpetrator is, but they suspect it's one serial murderer, one serial killer, going around killing prostitutes. Okay, and in the film, Donald Sutherland begins to see flashes of a red-hooded figure of diminutive stature. So presumably this is his daughter, or the ghost of his daughter, wearing a red raincoat, just like his daughter did when she died, was wearing when she drowned. So he starts following these premonitions around And at one point, he has a premonition of his own death. But he doesn't understand the premonition. So, and the psychic that they hired doesn't really have answers at this point. Doesn't really know what's going on. But neither does Donald Sutherland. So neither of them really understand these premonitions. But at one point, he nearly does actually die. And you could say maybe, it's alluded that maybe he actually did die in the film, but it's not portrayed that way on screen. On screen, he has a scaffolding accident. He's doing restoration work in a cathedral, and the scaffolding breaks, and he is clinging on for dear life. And in the film, Donald Sutherland did his own stunts for whatever reason. I don't really know why. I don't know if he just wanted to do them, or maybe the stunt person was sick, or I don't know, couldn't be insured, or I quit. I don't know the backstory, but the wires, the Peter Pan wires that were supporting Donald, became twisted, and after the shoot was over, the stunt coordinator said that if he had let go of the scaffolding at any point, he would have fallen, possibly broken his back or broken his legs, or broken a leg, or maybe died. So that was kind of interesting. But anyway, so he's been having these premonitions of his own death. And as I said, it's alluded to that maybe in reality he dies in the scaffolding accident, but the story continues. And he chases, at the end of the film, he chases the red hooded figure into a cathedral and up some stairs into this small attic room, like this room or this attic, or like this, storage space. I don't really know what you call it, that has a short or a low roof, so you can't really stand up. Donald Sutherland can't stand up in this room. Chases this red hooded figure into this room. The red hooded figure is facing the brick wall, and he thinks it's his daughter, of course, or the ghost of his daughter. And his wife is chasing after him because his wife received a further premonition from the psychic that if he goes into this cathedral, he'll die. So now Donald Sutherland doesn't know this, doesn't know that his wife is chasing after him. But he goes into the room, kneeling, and the red hooded figure turns around, and it's not his daughter. It is a dwarf, a female dwarf, an old dwarf with a wrinkly face and a long nose, and not a very pretty sight. And so he's stunned, and he realizes at that moment that he was not chasing his daughter. After all, he was chasing rather the murderer, who was going around slashing the throats of prostitutes in Venice. And you could kind of see how a woman like that might take up that line of work, or that kind of life path. So she pulls out a razor and slices his neck, cuts his carotid artery, and he bleeds out and dies. Okay, so the premonition was self-fulfilling. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that is the backstory behind that video that I made about Cringeosaurus.